My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 42 years old, and for most of my life, I believed my father was the hardest working man in America. I also believed he loved my mother. I believed a lot of things that turned out not to be true. The strange part is that the lie lasted almost 40 years. And my mother never saw it. At least, not until the day everything exploded. Growing up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, my father was rarely home. He worked as a regional sales manager for a manufacturing company. At least that was what he always told us. Every Monday morning, he packed a suitcase, kissed my mother on the forehead, and drove away. Every Thursday night, sometimes Friday morning, he came back. That routine lasted for decades. Welcome to a new video. I hope you'll enjoy the story. This will make your day, just watch completely. If you are new here, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks. Now let's get back to the story. My mother never complained. She would stand in the driveway waving goodbye while holding a coffee mug with both hands. Then she would spend the week taking care of everything herself. Bills. Groceries. Doctor appointments. School meetings. Broken appliances. She handled it all. Meanwhile, my father would return home acting exhausted. Long week, he would say while dropping his suitcase near the front door. My mother would immediately make his favorite dinner. Steak. Mashed potatoes. Fresh rolls. Like he was some kind of hero returning from battle. As kids, my younger sister Rachel and I thought that was normal. But looking back now, little things never made sense. For example, Dad never invited us to company events. Not once. Other kids sometimes visited their parents' offices or attended holiday parties. We never did. Whenever we asked, he always had an answer. It's boring. You wouldn't enjoy it. Too much work stuff. Nobody questioned him. Especially Mom. She trusted him completely. The kind of trust people write wedding vows about. The kind of trust that can become dangerous. Years passed. Rachel got married. I became a high school teacher. My parents grew older. Nothing seemed unusual. Then came Dad's 65th birthday. That was the day the cracks finally started showing. Rachel and I decided to organize a surprise party. Nothing fancy. Just family, friends, neighbors, and some people from church. We rented a banquet room at a local country club. My mother spent weeks planning every detail. She picked decorations. Ordered a custom cake. Even created a slideshow filled with old family photos. I remember watching her sit at the kitchen table late one night sorting through pictures. She smiled at every photo. Dad held me as a baby. Dad teaches Rachel to ride a bicycle. Dad standing beside Mom at their 20th anniversary dinner. She looked happy. Proud. Like she had spent 40 years building something beautiful. I wish I could go back and warn her. The party started on a Saturday afternoon. Everything seemed perfect. Guests filled the room. People laughed. Music played softly from speakers mounted near the ceiling. Dad arrived and acted genuinely surprised. For the first hour, it felt like one of those family memories people talk about for years. Then the doors opened. At first, nobody paid attention. A woman walked inside. Maybe in her late 50s. Nicely dressed. Confidence. Behind her came two young adults. A man and a woman. Both looked around my age. I assumed they were guests who had entered the wrong room. Then I noticed something strange. The young man had my father's eyes. Exactly the same eyes. The same smile too. My stomach tightened. Across the room, Rachel stopped talking in the middle of a sentence. She saw it too. The woman scanned the crowd. Then her gaze landed directly on my father. And she smiled. Not the smile of a stranger. Not the smile of an old coworker. It was something far more personal. My father's face instantly lost color. For a moment, nobody moved. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Even the music seemed distant. The woman started walking toward him. Step by step. Like she belonged there. Like she had every right to be there. My mother noticed the expression on Dad's face. "Frank?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. The woman stopped directly in front of him. The young man and young woman stood beside her. All three looked nervous. Then the woman spoke. 4 simple words. Words that changed everything. "Frank, we need to talk." My father looked around the room. At me. At Rachel. My mother. Then back at the woman. Nobody understood what was happening. Not yet. But everyone could feel it. The tension spread through the room like a storm cloud. My mother set down her plate. Slowly. Carefully. As if she suddenly sensed danger. The young woman beside the stranger looked directly at my father. Her eyes were filled with tears. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Dad, please." The room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. My mother stared at the young woman. Then my father. Then back again. Confusion slowly turned into horror. Because for the first time in 40 years, the impossible question finally appeared on her face. Who are these people? And why are they calling my husband Dad? That was the moment everything changed. Nobody moved. The entire banquet room seemed trapped in a strange silence. My father stood frozen beside the birthday cake. The candles were still burning. Wax slowly dripped down the sides while more than 50 people stared at him. The young woman who had called him Dad looked terrified. The young man beside her looked angry. And my mother looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. "Frank?" she asked again. Her voice was barely above a whisper. My father swallowed hard. "I can explain." Those 4 words made everything worse. Because innocent people usually answer a question. Guilty people ask for time. The woman who had entered with the 2 strangers folded her arms. 40 years, Frank," she said quietly. "I think you've had enough time." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. My Aunt Linda slowly lowered her coffee cup. Rachel walked toward our mother. I followed. Neither of us knew what was happening, but we could see our mother's hands trembling. The young man suddenly spoke. "We didn't come here to cause a scene." His voice was steady, but his jaw was clenched. "We just got tired of being hidden." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Hidden. The word hit harder than anything else. My father looked at him sharply. "Mark, not here." So he knew his name. Of course he knew his name. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some crazy mistake. My father knew all 3 of them. My mother stared at him. "You know them?" Her eyes were wide. The question sounded almost childish. Like she already knew the answer but desperately wanted a different one. Nobody answered. That silence said everything. The woman finally looked directly at my mother. For the first time, she seemed genuinely sorry. "I'm sorry," she said softly. My mother blinked. "Sorry for what?" The woman looked down. Then back up. For all of it. The room felt smaller. Hotter. The music had stopped completely now. Even the waiters stood frozen near the walls. My father suddenly stepped forward. Karen, please. Karen. He knew her name too. My mother's face lost what little color remained. She slowly turned toward him. You know her. Not a question. A fact. My father opened his mouth. I closed it. Then I opened it again. And that hesitation destroyed whatever hope remained. The tears appeared in my mother's eyes. Not dramatic tears. Not movie tears. Just a few silent ones sliding down her cheeks. 40 years of trust are beginning to crack. Rachel grabbed Dad's arm. What is going on? He pulled away. I said I can explain. Then explain. Rachel shouted. Several guests flinched. My sister was normally calm. I had never heard her yell at our father before. The young woman stepped forward. She looked almost as frightened as we were. My name is Emily. Nobody responded. She looked at my mother. Then Rachel. Then at me. I never wanted this. Her voice shook. But we're his family too. The words landed like a hammer. Family too. My mother physically staggered backward. I caught her before she lost her balance. The room exploded into whispers. People weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Oh my God. Did she say family? No way. How long? Every whisper felt like another knife. My mother had spent weeks planning this celebration. She had baked cookies for the guests. Printed photographs. Written a speech thanking her husband for 40 years of marriage. Now half the room was staring at her with pity. The other half was staring at my father with disbelief. I had never seen humiliation look so real. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the way my mother suddenly avoided eye contact. The way she stared at the floor. The way she seemed to shrink inside her own skin. Then something happened that made everything even worse. Karen reached into her purse. She pulled out a photograph. An old photograph. She handed it directly to my mother. My father immediately stepped forward. Don't. But it was too late. My mother looked down. I looked too. The picture showed my father. Karen. A little boy. A little girl. All standing together in front of a Christmas tree. Smiling. Like a normal family. A date was written in the corner. December 1998. I felt sick. Because in December 1998, my father had spent Christmas with us too. I remembered it. I was 14 years old. Rachel was 11. We had opened presents together that morning. Somehow, my father had celebrated Christmas with two different families. The realization hit me like a punch. My mother stared at the photograph for several seconds. Then she looked at my father. The tears were gone now. That frightened me more than the tears. How long? She asked. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Frank. Her voice was calm. Dangerously calm. How long? My father looked around the room. At the guests. His children. At the family he had built. And at the family he had hidden. Then he lowered his head. When he finally answered, the words barely came out. 38 years. The room gasped. Someone actually dropped a glass. It shattered on the floor. But nobody looked. Because every eye was fixed on my mother. 38 years. Not an affair. Not a mistake. Not a secret that lasted months. An entire second life. Almost as long as his marriage. My mother's lips parted. But no words came out. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse. Instead, she slowly placed the photograph on a nearby table. Then she removed her wedding ring. and set it beside the picture. The entire room watched. Nobody dared speak. Then she looked directly at my father. And asked the question that changed everything. Who else knew? The question hung in the air. Who else knew? My mother's voice wasn't loud. That was what made it so powerful. The entire room was silent. Even the people whispering moments earlier had stopped. My father stared at the floor. Nobody answered. My mother looked around the room. Slowly. Carefully. Like she was seeing every face for the first time. Then she looked back at him. Frank. He still wouldn't meet her eyes. Who else knew? Finally, he spoke. Karen knew. A few people laughed bitterly. The answer was ridiculous. Of course Karen knew. She had been living the secret. My mother's expression hardened. Besides her. Dad rubbed his forehead. I suddenly noticed how old he looked. Not tired. Not stressed. Old. Like the weight of nearly 4 decades had landed on him all at once. My brother knew. Gasps spread across the room. My Uncle Robert froze. His wife immediately turned toward him. You knew. Robert looked horrified. Linda, please. You knew, she repeated. His silence answered for him. My mother closed her eyes. Robert had been her brother-in-law for 40 years. He had attended birthdays. Thanks. Christmas dinners. School graduations. All while keeping this secret. The betrayal seemed to grow larger every second. Then Dad spoke again. My mother knew. Another shockwave. My grandmother had passed away 5 years earlier. My mother had cared for her through cancer treatments. Driven her to appointments. Cooked meals for her. Sat beside her hospital bed. And all that time, Grandma had known. I watched my mother's face crumble a little more. Not from sadness. From realization. Every answer was rewriting her entire life. Rachel suddenly stepped forward. Who else? Dad looked trapped. Like a man standing in the middle of a collapsing building. My old business partner knew. Anyone else? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told us there was more. Much more. My mother laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It sounded empty. Almost broken. Just tell the truth for once. The room went completely still. Dad swallowed hard. A few friends. A few? Rachel snapped. How many is a few? He didn't answer. Karen quietly looked away. Even she seemed ashamed. My mother stood there for several seconds. Then she nodded slowly. As if she were putting pieces together. Little memories. Little moments. Little things that never made sense. I could almost see it happening. The business trips. The missed holidays. The unexplained absences. The late-night phone calls. The separate bank account he always claimed was for work expenses. All those tiny puzzle pieces suddenly formed one horrible picture. Then something unexpected happened. Karen spoke. I didn't know about your family at first. Everyone turned toward her. Tears filled her eyes. When I met Frank, he told me he was divorced. Dad immediately looked up. Karen. No. For the first time, she sounded angry. Not this time. She wiped her eyes. You lied to me too. The room shifted again. Nobody had expected that. Not even me. Karen wasn't acting like some villain. She looked like someone who had spent years living inside a lie herself. She looked exhausted. Hurt. Embarrassed. By the time I learned the truth, she continued, Emily was already born. Emily lowered her head. Mark stared at the wall. Neither looked proud to be standing there. Neither looked like they wanted this. For the first time, I felt something strange. Not anger. Not sympathy exactly. Just confusion. Because they looked as shocked as we were. They weren't the secret. They were victims of it too. My mother seemed to realize that as well. She looked at Emily. Then Mark. Really looked at them. Not as enemies. Not as intruders. Just two people caught in something terrible. How old are you? She asked softly. Emily hesitated. 37. The room felt smaller again. 37. Dad had admitted the secret lasted 38 years. The math was impossible to ignore. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Rachel began crying. Because suddenly there was no doubt left. No gray area. No misunderstanding. My father had started another family almost immediately after marrying our mother. The timing made it worse. So much worse. Dad sat heavily in a chair. His shoulders slumped. For the first time all evening, he seemed defeated. I never meant for this to happen. Nobody responded. The sentence sounded pathetic. Like trying to stop a flood with an umbrella. 40 years didn't happen by accident. Thousands of choices had created this moment. Thousands. My mother stared at him. You watched me build a life with you. Dad remained silent. You watched me trust you. Nothing. You watched me defend you. Still nothing. The tears returned to her eyes. Not loud tears. The quiet kind. The kind that hurts to watch. Then she said something that broke every heart in the room. I spent 40 years worrying that I wasn't a good enough wife. Dad finally looked up. Pain flashed across his face. But she wasn't finished. When you were distant, I blamed myself. Her voice trembled. When you missed anniversaries, I made excuses. A tear rolled down her cheek. When you forgot birthdays, I told the kids you were busy. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I protected your reputation. She shook her head slowly. And all this time, you were protecting another life. The truth landed like a stone. Heavy. Impossible to ignore. Dad opened his mouth. I closed it. Then whispered the only words he seemed capable of saying anymore. I'm sorry. My mother stared at him. Then I looked around the room full of guests. Neighbors. Friends. Church members. People who had come to celebrate a marriage that no longer existed. And then she said something that changed the direction of the entire night. No. Her voice was calm. Steady. Certain. I'm done hearing apologies. She turned toward me and Rachel. Let's go home. I thought the nightmare was ending. I was wrong. Because as we started toward the exit, a voice called out from the back of the room. A voice we never expected to hear. Before anyone leaves, there's something else you should know. And suddenly every head in the room turned again. Before anyone leaves, there's something else you should know. The voice came from the back of the banquet room. Everyone turned. It was Uncle Robert. The same uncle who had already admitted knowing the secret. His face was pale. His wife stood several feet away from him now, arms crossed tightly over her chest. For a moment, it looked like he might change his mind. Like he might sit back down and stay quiet. But he didn't. He walked slowly toward the front of the room. Toward my mother. Toward my father. Toward the disaster that was no longer hiding in the shadows. My father immediately stood up. Robert, don't. The warning came too late. Robert shook his head. No. His voice cracked. I should have said something years ago. The room remained silent. My mother looked exhausted. Like every new truth was another weight placed on her shoulders. What is it? She asked. Robert swallowed hard. Then looked directly at her. Frank wasn't supporting just one family. Nobody understood what he meant. Not at first. Then he continued. He was using money from both families. A knot formed in my stomach. My father's eyes widened. Stop. But Robert kept going. There were separate accounts. My mother stared at him. What accounts? Robert hesitated. Then said the words that changed everything again. There was a house. The room exploded into whispers. A house. Not an apartment. Not a motel. Not temporary arrangements. A house. An actual home. My father covered his face with one hand. My mother looked completely lost. A house? Robert nodded. In Indianapolis. Karen closed her eyes. Emily looked down. Mark stared at the floor. Nobody denied it. Nobody could. My mother slowly sat down in the nearest chair. The strength seemed to leave her legs. For 40 years she had clipped coupons. Skipped vacations. Delayed replacing old furniture. Worried about bills. I remembered dozens of conversations growing up. Maybe next year, she would say whenever Rachel or I asked for something expensive. Dad always claimed work was unpredictable. Money had to be managed carefully. There wasn't enough. Now we were learning he had been helping maintain an entirely separate household. The realization made my hands shake. Rachel looked just as stunned. How much money? She asked. Nobody answered. Dad stared at the carpet. Karen finally spoke. I didn't know where all the money came from. Her voice was quiet. He handled everything. My mother laughed again. That same painful laugh. Not because anything was funny. Because reality had become too unbelievable. A house. She stared at the table. A whole house. I suddenly remembered every family vacation that never happened. Every excuse. Every promise postponed until later. Every year my mother quietly accepted less. And now the reason was standing right in front of us. Then Robert spoke again. I think she deserves to know everything. Dad's head snapped up. No. The single word came out sharp. Almost desperate. That reaction scared me. Because it meant there was more. Much more. My mother noticed it too. What else? Nobody answered. What else, Frank? The room seemed to tighten around us. Dad rubbed his face. For several seconds, he looked like he was deciding whether to lie again. Then Emily unexpectedly stepped forward. Dad. He looked at her. She looked heartbroken. Not angry. Heartbroken. It's over. The words landed hard. Because they weren't coming from us. They were coming from the daughter he had hidden. The daughter he had spent decades protecting. Tears filled her eyes. Just tell the truth. For the first time all evening, my father looked completely defeated. His shoulders dropped. His voice became almost a whisper. There was a college fund. Rachel frowned. What? Dad stared at the floor. For Emily and Mark. Silence. Then Rachel's face drained of color. Because she understood before anyone else. Growing up, neither of us had college funds. Our parents couldn't afford them. Or so we were told. Rachel had worked evenings at a grocery store. I had taken student loans. We both struggled. We both sacrificed. All while another set of children had college money waiting for them. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Not loud tears. The quiet kind. The dangerous kind. You told me there wasn't enough money. Dad didn't answer. You told me we couldn't afford it. Still nothing. Rachel shook her head. Over and over. Like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. I felt sick. Not because Emily and Mark had help. They hadn't asked for any of this. They were victims too. What hurt was realizing how many times our father had looked us in the eye and chosen deception. How many opportunities he had to stop. How many chances he had to tell the truth. And every single time, he chose himself. My mother sat perfectly still. Almost too still. That frightened me. She wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't yelling. Wasn't arguing. She was simply listening. And every new fact seemed to push her further away emotionally. Then she looked at Karen. When did you learn about me? Karen wiped her eyes. About 5 years after Emily was born. The answer hit hard. So you knew for more than 30 years. Karen lowered her head. Yes. My mother nodded slowly. No anger. No shouting. Just disappointment. The kind that cuts deeper. Then she looked at Emily and Mark. Neither could meet her eyes. Finally she spoke. You two didn't do anything wrong. The room fell silent again. Emily immediately began crying. Mark looked close to tears himself. My mother stood up. Slowly. Carefully. The room watched her. Every single person. Then she looked at my father one final time. 40 years together. 40 years of birthdays. Christmas mornings. Family dinners. Hospital visits. Anniversaries. Memories. All reduced to this moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Almost gentle. And somehow that made it even worse. You stole something from me that I can never get back. A tear slid down Dad's cheek. But she continued. You stole 40 years of informed choice. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because everyone knew she was right. Then she picked up her purse. Turned toward the door. And walked away. Rachel and I immediately followed. But as we reached the parking lot, my phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. Just one sentence. One sentence that would reveal the secret was even bigger than we imagined. The message read. Your father isn't hiding one family. He's hiding 3. The parking lot was dark. The sun had already disappeared behind the trees, and the lights from the banquet hall glowed against the night sky. My mother stood beside Rachel's car. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone had spent hours tearing pages out of her life story. Then my phone vibrated. I read the message once. Then twice. Then a third time. Your father isn't hiding one family. He's hiding 3. A chill ran through me. What is it? Rachel asked. I handed her the phone. Her eyes widened. What? My mother looked at both of us. Neither of us wanted to show her. Not now. Not after everything she had already endured. But she saw our faces. Daniel. Her voice was firm. Show me. I slowly handed her the phone. The moment she finished reading, her expression changed. Not a shock. Not anger. Just disbelief. No. She shook her head. No. That's impossible. I wanted to agree. I wanted the message to be nonsense. A cruel joke. A drunk guest trying to cause trouble. But then another message arrived. This time there was a photo attached. My heart nearly stopped. The photograph showed my father standing beside another woman. A completely different woman. They were younger. Maybe 20 years younger. Standing in front of a lake. Both smiling. The image had a date stamped in the corner. August 2007. Rachel grabbed my arm. Oh my God. My mother stared at the screen. Her hands trembled. Then a third message arrived. I know the truth. Call me if you want proof. A phone number followed. Nothing else. No name. No explanation. Just a number. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The only sounds came from distant traffic and people leaving the banquet hall behind us. Then my mother did something surprising. Call. I blinked. What? Call the number. Her voice was steady. Stronger than it had been all evening. I hesitated. Mom. Call. For the first time that night, she wasn't reacting. She was deciding. Taking control. I dialed. The phone rang twice. Then someone answered. A woman. Older. Nervous. Daniel. I froze. How do you know my name? The woman sighed. Because I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for years. Rachel and Mom moved closer so they could hear. The woman continued. My name is Susan. I had never heard the name before. But something about her voice felt genuine. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just tired. I worked with your father 15 years ago. My stomach tightened. And there was a long pause. Then she spoke. Your father had another relationship. My mother closed her eyes. Susan continued. He told that woman he was divorced too. The same lie. Again. The realization made me sick. Was there another child? Rachel asked. Silence. Then a quiet answer. Yes. Mom leaned against the car. I immediately grabbed her arm. The woman on the phone kept talking. I didn't know everything at first. Most people didn't. Frank was very careful. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. He traveled constantly. Nobody questioned it. Of course they didn't. Neither had we. My entire childhood suddenly looked different. Every business trip. Every missed birthday. Every unexplained absence. All of it meant something else now. Do you have proof? I asked. Yes. The answer came immediately. Too soon. Like she'd been waiting years for someone to ask. I kept emails. Rachel and I exchanged a look. Emails meant evidence. Dates. Names. Details. Real proof. Not rumors. Not gossip. The truth. Susan hesitated. Then added something unexpected. I wanted to tell your mother years ago. Mom looked up. What stopped you? The woman sounded ashamed. Fear. Nobody replied. Because fear made sense. People stay silent for many reasons. Sometimes because they benefit. Sometimes because they don't want trouble. Sometimes because they convince themselves it isn't their responsibility. Susan's voice cracked. I'm sorry. My mother looked at the dark pavement. Then quietly replied. You're not the one who married me. The line went silent. Even Susan didn't know what to say. A few minutes later we ended the call. None of us moved. The night air felt colder now. Across the parking lot, Guests continued leaving the banquet hall. Many looked at us. Some looked away quickly. Others stared. The gossip would spread by morning. Through church groups. Neighborhoods. Social media. Family text chains. The secret was no longer a secret. It was a public explosion. Then the banquet hall doors opened. My father stepped outside. Alone. For a moment, nobody spoke. He looked smaller somehow. Less powerful. Like the lies had been carrying him all these years. Now they are gone. He slowly approached us. Mom didn't move. Neither did Rachel. I stepped forward slightly. Dad stopped several feet away. His eyes were red. I need to talk to you. My mother shook her head. No. Please. No. His voice broke. Mary. It was the first time all evening he'd used her name. My mother stared at him. You don't get to ask me for anything anymore. The words hit hard. Dad looked crushed. But she wasn't finished. You had 40 years to tell the truth. Silence. You had thousands of chances. Still silent. You looked me in the eyes every day. The pain in her voice was impossible to miss. Then she asked the question none of us wanted answered. How many lies are left? Dad looked away. That single movement told us everything. There were still more. More secrets. More betrayals. More pieces of a life we never truly knew. And in that moment, standing under the parking lot lights, I realized something terrifying. The birthday party wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because the next morning, Susan sent the emails. And buried inside them was a discovery that would put my father's entire future at risk. The emails arrived at 8:17 the next morning. I remember the exact time because none of us had slept. My mother sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a gray sweater. A cold cup of coffee rested beside her. Rachel sat across from her. I stood by the window. The house felt different now. Not physically. Emotionally. Every photograph on the walls seemed to belong to strangers. Every family memory suddenly carried questions. Then my laptop chimed. The files had arrived. Susan had sent dozens of emails. Scanned documents. Photos. Travel records. Years of evidence. My stomach tightened as I opened the first folder. For several minutes, nobody spoke. The only sounds were mouse clicks and quiet breathing. Then I found something. Something that made my heart stop. Dad, I whispered. Rachel looked over. What? I turned the screen toward her. An email from 12 years earlier. Attached was a mortgage document. The Indianapolis house. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was whose name appeared on it. Not Karen. Not my father. My mother. Rachel stared at the screen. What? I read it again. Then again. There was no mistake. My mother's name was listed on paperwork connected to the house. She had never seen it. Never signed it knowingly. Never lived there. Yet somehow her name appeared on legal documents. Mom slowly stood up. What does that mean? I didn't know. But it looked serious. Very serious. The more we searched, the worse things became. There were signatures. Documents. Applications. Financial records. Some carried signatures that looked almost identical to my mother's handwriting. Almost. But not quite. Rachel looked sick. Are you saying he forged her signature? Nobody answered. Because nobody wanted to say the words out loud. Then another discovery appeared. Several loans. Multiple accounts. Transactions stretching back years. The amount of money involved was far larger than we imagined. Not thousands. Hundreds of thousands. My mother sat back down. The color drained from her face. For decades she had worried about grocery budgets. Meanwhile, entire financial worlds existed without her knowledge. Then the phone rang. It was Uncle Robert. I answered. His voice sounded nervous. Have you looked at the emails? Yes. A long silence followed. Then he sighed. I think your father is in real trouble. The statement hung heavily between us. What do you mean? Robert hesitated. Some of those documents were questioned years ago. I froze. What? He asked me not to say anything. Another secret. Another silence. Another person who knew. My patience snapped. You all knew something. Robert didn't argue. Because he couldn't. I know. His voice sounded ashamed. I should have spoken up. But apologies feel worthless now. The damage had already happened. By noon, word of the birthday party had spread across town. People called. Texted. Sent messages. Some expressed sympathy. Others wanted gossip. My mother ignored all of them. She sat quietly in the living room staring at the television without turning it on. Every so often she would glance at a family photo. Then look away. Like touching a painful bruise. Around 3 in the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Nobody moved. The knock came again. Then a third time. I looked through the window. It was Dad. My mother immediately stood. Not to greet him. To leave the room. But then she stopped. For 40 years she had walked away from conflict. Made excuses. Stayed quiet. This time she remained standing. Let him in. I opened the door. Dad looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then he stepped inside. The familiar house suddenly felt unfamiliar with him in it. He looked at my mother. Mary. She didn't respond. I need to explain. No. Her answer was immediate. You need to tell the truth. The distinction hit hard. Dad nodded slowly. Then he sat down. For the next hour, pieces of the story finally emerged. Not excuses. Facts. Ugly facts. Years ago, one lie had become 2. Then 3. Then dozens. Each lie required another. And another. And another. Until eventually the truth became impossible to reach. Karen wasn't the only relationship. Susan had been right. There had been another woman years earlier. Another child. A son. The relationship hadn't lasted. But the secret remained. Rachel covered her mouth. My mother stared ahead silently. Dad continued speaking. The words sounded empty now. Like someone reading a confession from a book. The details hardly mattered anymore. The damage was already done. Then my mother asked a question. A simple question. The most important question of all. Did you ever love me? The room went silent. Dad immediately looked at her. Yes. The answer came fast. Too fast. My mother shook her head. No. Think carefully. Tears filled his eyes. But she continued. Because love isn't what you say. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. It's what you protect. The words hit every person in the room. Including him. My father looked completely shattered. Because for the first time, he understood something. This wasn't about cheating anymore. It wasn't about money. Or houses. Or secrets. It was about trust. And trust, once destroyed, doesn't magically return. Then my mother stood. I walked to the hallway. And removed every framed wedding photograph from the wall. One by one. She placed them carefully on the floor. Not angrily. Not violently. Quietly. That silence hurt more than shouting ever could. Dad watched the entire thing. Unable to stop her. Unable to defend himself. When she finished, she turned toward him. You need to leave. He opened his mouth. Then I closed it. Because there was nothing left to say. As he walked toward the front door, he stopped. I looked back at us. At the family he had spent 40 years deceiving. Then he left. The door closed behind him. And for the first time in my life, my father was truly alone. But none of us knew that within weeks, the financial investigation triggered by those documents would expose one final truth. A truth so shocking that even Karen had never known it. The investigation started quietly. At first, it was just lawyers reviewing paperwork. Bank records. Mortgage documents. Old financial statements. My mother didn't want revenge. She wanted answers. For the first time in 40 years, she wanted the full truth. And eventually, the truth arrived. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Like a puzzle nobody wanted to finish. 3 weeks after the birthday party, our lawyer called. I was sitting with Mom and Rachel in the living room when the phone rang. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. But when it ended, my mother simply sat down and stared ahead. What happened? Rachel asked. Mom looked at us. Her expression was strangely calm. The Indianapolis house wasn't paid for by your father. Neither of us understood. What do you mean? She took a slow breath. Part of it was paid for using money from an account that belonged to your grandmother. I frowned. My grandmother? Mom nodded. The same grandmother who had known the secret. The same grandmother Mom had cared for during her illness. The same grandmother she had treated with kindness and respect. Apparently, years earlier, a large amount of money had been moved from an account intended for future family inheritance. Without explanation. Without discussion. Without transparency. The discovery shocked everyone. Even Karen. Even Uncle Robert. Even the lawyers. Because it showed something important. The lies hadn't just hurt people emotionally. They had affected generations. When Karen learned the news, she called my mother. I expected anger. Blame. Arguments. Instead, the conversation lasted nearly an hour. Two women connected by the same deception. Two women who had spent decades believing different versions of the same man. When the call ended, Mom looked exhausted. But lighter somehow. What did she say? I asked. Mom stared out the window. She's tired too. That answer stayed with me. Because for months, I had viewed everything as two sides. Us and them. One family against another. But life wasn't that simple. Karen hadn't won. Emily hadn't won. Mark hadn't won. Nobody had. My father's choices had damaged everyone. Including the people he claimed he was protecting. A month later, the divorce proceedings began. My father didn't fight them. He signed papers. Provided records. Answered questions. The man who had spent 40 years hiding now seemed too tired to hide anymore. I saw him only once during that time. He looked older. Much older. His shoulders were bent. His confidence was gone. We sat together at a small diner. The same diner where he used to take me for pancakes when I was a kid. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me. I don't expect forgiveness. I studied him carefully. For the first time, he wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything. No excuses. No stories. No explanations. Just consequences. I don't understand why, I finally said. He nodded slowly. Neither did I. The answer surprised me. Because it sounded honest. Pathetic. But honestly. A man who had spent decades building lies only to discover they trapped him too. When we left, I shook his hand. Not because everything was fixed. Nothing was fixed. But because anger wasn't the only thing I wanted to carry for the rest of my life. 6 months after the birthday party, the divorce became official. 40 years of marriage ended with signatures on paper. No celebration. No dramatic speeches. Just reality. Afterward, my mother sold the house. Not because she had to. Because she wanted a fresh start. The old house held too many ghosts. Too many memories that no longer felt the same. She moved into a smaller home near a lake. A peaceful place with large windows and a garden. For the first time in years, she started making decisions for herself. Not for a husband. Not for a marriage. For herself. One afternoon, nearly a year after everything happened, Rachel and I visited her. She was planting flowers. The sun was shining. Birds chirped from nearby trees. Simple things. Normal things. The kind of things that had felt impossible during the chaos. Mom stood up and brushed dirt from her hands. Then she smiled. A real smile. Not the polite smile she'd worn for years. A genuine one. And suddenly I realized something. The story wasn't about my father's secret anymore. It was about what happened after the secret. It was about survival. About dignity. About rebuilding. About refusing to let someone else's choices define the rest of your life. A few months later, something unexpected happened. Emily invited Mom to lunch. Then Mark joined them. Eventually, Rachel and I met them too. The first meeting was awkward. The second was easier. The third felt almost normal. None of us became one big happy family. That would have been unrealistic. The pain was too deep. The history is too complicated. But we stopped viewing each other as enemies. Because none of us had created the lie. We had simply inherited the damage. As for my father, he now lives alone in a small apartment. He speaks to all of his children occasionally. Some relationships are improving slowly. Others may never fully heal. That's the reality of betrayal. Some scars fade. Some remain. The last time I saw my mother standing beside the lake near her new home, she watched the sunset for several minutes. Then she said something I will never forget. I wasted years trusting the wrong person. I waited. She smiled softly. But I won't waste the years I have left. The orange sunlight reflected across the water. The breeze moved gently through the trees. And for the first time since that terrible birthday party, she looked free. Not because justice erased the pain. Not because the past disappeared. But because the truth was finally out. The game was over. The lies were finished. And after 40 years of living in someone else's story, my mother had finally become the author of her own. I am glad that you have watched the video completely. If you have time, kindly subscribe to the channel and share it with your other friends. See you in the next video and let me know about the timing of my videos. Which timing do you think I should upload my video, or is this timing fine?